90% of family fortunes vanish. By the third generation, gone. Not most families. Nearly all of them. A lifetime built it. 2 generations destroy it. Most blame the heirs. Foolish, lazy, unlucky, they say. Machiavelli would ask a colder question. Was the fortune ever built to last? Or only built for its founder? The answer decides everything. 12 laws answer that question. Learn them or lose everything. A prince who builds a kingdom but leaves no structure for succession does not leave behind a kingdom at all. He leaves behind a prize, fought over by whoever is strongest or most ruthless the moment he is gone. Wealth without structure meets the exact same fate, just in slower motion and with better manners. This is the truth almost nobody wants to hear. Wealth that dies with its founder was never generational wealth. It was simply a very large, very temporary paycheck, spent slowly enough to feel permanent while the founder was alive to manage it. Look at the families whose names actually last centuries, and the pattern is never accidental. They did not simply earn more than everyone else. They understood something the average wealthy family never bothers to learn, that a fortune is not an object you hand to your children. It is a system you either build to run without you, or one that quietly stops the moment you do. This is not a video about saving more or investing smarter. Those lessons matter, but they are not why fortunes actually collapse. Fortunes collapse because nobody structured them to survive the humans who would inherit them. Human nature is the actual threat, and human nature does not change from generation to generation. Every generation believes it will be different, more careful, more disciplined, more united than the ones history warns about. Almost none of them are. The families who genuinely break the pattern do not do it through good intentions. They do it through structure specific enough to survive good intentions failing, exactly as they eventually always do. Here are 12 laws for building wealth that survives you, not just wealth that serves you. Most families will never apply a single one. The few who do will still be standing 3 generations from now, while the crowd around them quietly disappears. None of these 12 laws are complicated. Every one of them is simple enough to explain in a single sentence. What makes them rare is not their difficulty. It is that applying them requires confronting your own eventual absence, honestly, years before it becomes unavoidable, which is precisely the conversation most families spend a lifetime finding reasons to postpone. Law number 1. Wealth that is not structured to survive you was never built to last. Most fortune builders spend their entire life accumulating and almost no time at all on what happens to that fortune the day they are gone. This is backwards. The accumulation phase is the easy half. The transfer phase is where nearly every fortune actually dies. Consider 2 builders who accumulate an identical fortune over an identical lifetime. One spends his final decades exclusively focused on growing the number larger. The other spends a meaningful portion of those same decades building the structure, the trusts, the governance, the rules that will outlive him. The first builder dies with a larger number and a family that dissolves it within a decade. The second builder dies with a smaller number and a family that is still compounding it 3 generations later. The size of the fortune was never the deciding factor. The structure around it was everything. This is uncomfortable for most founders to accept because building structure means confronting your own mortality years or decades before it becomes urgent. Every hour spent on succession planning is an hour spent imagining the family without you in it, which is precisely why so many founders quietly avoid the work until it is too late to do it properly. Law number 2. Teach ownership before you teach obedience. Most wealthy families raise heirs to follow instructions, manage a household, maintain appearances. Almost none of them raise heirs to actually think like an owner, because ownership requires judgment, and judgment is uncomfortable to hand over while the founder is still alive and still wants control. An heir raised only to obey inherits a fortune he has never once been trusted to make a real decision about. The first real decision he makes with real stakes happens the day the founder dies, with no practice, no track record, and an entire fortune suddenly resting on his untested judgment. This is not a design flaw. It is the predictable result of a design that was never actually built for succession. The family that survives instead gives its heirs small, real decisions with real consequences years before any inheritance arrives. A modest budget to manage, a small investment to oversee, a real mistake to make while the stakes are still recoverable. By the time real wealth transfers, the heir has already failed small and learned, rather than failing large for the first time with everything on the line. Consider two heirs raised in identical households with identical fortunes waiting for them. One is handed a modest allowance to manage from a young age, allowed to make real spending mistakes and absorb their real consequences. The other is given everything he asks for without ever once managing a budget of his own. 20 years later, the first heir approaches a family business decision with genuine judgment earned through practice. The second approaches it exactly as unprepared as the day he was born, except now the stakes are the entire family fortune. Law number 3, never let one heir hold the only key. Concentrated control feels efficient while the founder is alive. It becomes catastrophic the moment he is gone. A fortune resting entirely on one heir's judgment, one heir's signature, one heir's temperament, is a fortune one bad decade away from total collapse. Picture a family that structures its wealth around a council of heirs and trusted advisors. No single person able to move the entire fortune alone. Now picture a different family that concentrates everything in a single favored heir, trusted completely and unconditionally. The first family survives a single heir's divorce, addiction, or simple incompetence relatively intact. The second family's entire fortune rises or falls on one person's worst year. Distributed control is slower. It is also the only version of control that survives contact with an actual human life, which is never as tidy as the plan assumed it would be. Founders resist this instinctively because concentrating everything in one trusted heir feels simpler and more loyal than building a council of checks and balances. But loyalty is not a substitute for structure. The heir who was perfectly trustworthy at 30 is not guaranteed to remain so at 50 through a difficult marriage, a business failure, or simply the slow erosion of judgment that pressure eventually produces in almost everyone. Law number 4. A fortune without rules dissolves faster than one that was never built. Money without governance does not sit still. It gets spent, borrowed against, fought over, and quietly drained by a dozen small decisions that each felt reasonable in isolation. The absence of rules is not neutral. It is an active force working against the fortune every single day. Nobody writes any rules down. The families whose wealth survives write the rules while the founder is still alive to enforce them. How much can be withdrawn? What requires unanimous agreement? What happens if an heir wants out entirely? The families whose wealth does not survive leave all of this to be improvised later by grieving heirs under pressure, often for the first time, exactly when clear thinking is hardest to find. Write the rules early. A fortune with no rules is not free. It is simply undefended. There is a reason so many families delay this work indefinitely. Writing the rules forces uncomfortable conversations about favoritism, about which heir gets more control, about what happens if a member wants to leave the arrangement entirely. Avoiding those conversations while the founder is alive does not make them disappear. It simply guarantees they happen later, without him, at the worst possible moment to have them for the first time. Law number 5. Protect the wealth from the family before protecting it from the world. Every wealthy family worries about outside threats, market crashes, lawsuits, thieves. Almost none of them spend equal energy protecting the fortune from its own members. A divorce that splits an ownership stake in half, a sibling rivalry that forces a premature sale, a spendthrift heir who quietly drains a shared account over several years. The uncomfortable truth is that internal threats destroy far more family fortunes than any external one ever does. A prenuptial agreement, a clear buyout structure, a spending policy enforced even against a favorite child. None of these feel generous or trusting, and all of them are the difference between a fortune that survives a difficult family event and one that does not. Guard the fortune from the market. Guard it twice as carefully from the people who will one day own it. Two families illustrate the gap clearly. One ensures every property, hedges every major position, and leaves every internal relationship entirely unstructured, trusting family bonds alone to hold everything together. The other spends equal energy on both fronts, external insurance and internal agreements. When a difficult divorce eventually strikes each family, the first loses a significant share of its holdings in the settlement. The second, protected by agreements written years earlier in calmer times, loses almost nothing at all. Law number 6. Spend on education, not on comfort, when raising heirs. A childhood spent surrounded by comfort, with no understanding of where that comfort came from, produces an heir who experiences money as weather, something that simply happens around him rather than something built, protected, and capable of running out. The families whose wealth survives generations invest heavily in financial education specifically. Not just a good school, but a genuine understanding of how the family's actual wealth works, what generates it, what threatens it, what it would take to lose it. The families whose wealth does not survive invest instead in comfort alone. Private tutors for academics, none for the actual mechanics of the fortune itself. An heir who understands the machine can maintain it. An heir who has only ever enjoyed its output cannot, and eventually will not need to, because there will be nothing left to maintain. This does not require raising heirs in artificial scarcity, which usually backfires into resentment rather than discipline. It requires deliberate transparency about the actual mechanics of the family's wealth, taught the same way any other serious subject would be taught, with real information rather than vague reassurance that everything will simply continue to be fine. Law number 7. Give responsibility before you give money. Handing an heir capital before he has ever managed anything of consequence is handing a loaded weapon to someone who has never held one. It rarely goes as planned, and the family usually only discovers this after a meaningful portion of the fortune is already gone. The disciplined approach reverses the order entirely. An heir earns increasing responsibility over a small piece of the family's actual holdings, a property to manage, a small business unit to oversee, long before he ever receives an outright distribution of capital. By the time real money changes hands, the family has real evidence of judgment, not just hope and good intentions. Responsibility first, capital second. Reverse the order, and you are not passing down wealth. You are passing down risk. Picture two heirs reaching 30 with an identical inheritance waiting for them. One spent the prior decade managing a small family property, making real decisions with real consequences, occasionally failing in ways that cost real but recoverable money. The other spent the same decade simply waiting for his inheritance to arrive, untested by anything of consequence. The capital transfers identically to both. Only one of them is actually prepared to hold it. Law number 8. The third generation is where fortunes usually die. Plan for it directly. The pattern is consistent enough across enough different cultures and centuries that it deserves to be named plainly. The founder builds it. The second generation, raised close enough to the struggle to respect it, generally preserves it. The third generation, raised in comfort with no memory of the struggle at all, is where the fortune most often disappears. This is not an accident of bad luck striking 3 generations in a row. It is the predictable result of the emotional connection to the original struggle, fading exactly as the family's collective spending habits expand to match the fortune's apparent size. The families who beat this pattern do it deliberately, building the third generation's financial education and governance structure years before that generation ever gains real control. If you know exactly where the fortune usually dies, plan for that generation specifically. Do not simply hope your family will be the exception. Most founders quietly assume their own family is naturally different, more disciplined, more grounded than the statistic suggests. Almost every family that eventually joins the statistic believed exactly the same thing right up until it happened to them. Assuming immunity is not a plan. It is simply the same mistake the 90% made, wearing a more comfortable name. Law number 9. Build institutions, not just accounts. A bank account is a number that any single decision can drain to zero in an afternoon. An institution, a family trust with real governance, a family business with a professional board, a foundation with a defined mission, is a structure that survives any single person's bad decision by design. The families whose wealth compounds across generations eventually stop thinking purely in terms of a shared pile of money and start thinking in terms of a structure that outlives any individual member entirely. The families whose wealth does not survive keep everything in accounts that any one member, at any one moment of poor judgment, can simply empty. An account serves whoever currently controls it. An institution serves the family itself, indefinitely, regardless of who currently sits at its head. Building a real institution takes years and real legal cost, which is exactly why so many families skip the work and simply keep everything in a shared account governed by nothing more than mutual trust. That trust holds admirably right up until it is tested by a genuine disagreement, and by then the absence of any real structure is no longer a minor inconvenience. It is the entire problem. Law number 10. Never let heirs discover wealth all at once. A young adult who suddenly learns the true scale of a family fortune all at once, with no gradual exposure beforehand, rarely responds to that information wisely. It reframes every relationship, every ambition, every daily decision overnight, usually for the worse. The families who manage this well disclose the scale of the fortune gradually, alongside gradually increasing responsibility, so that by the time an heir understands the true size of what he stands to inherit, he has also had years to develop the judgment to actually handle that knowledge. The families who manage this poorly either hide it entirely until a single overwhelming reveal, or expose it far too early to a child who has no framework yet for what to do with it. Timing the reveal is not deception. It is simply matching information to the readiness required to use it well. Consider two heirs who both eventually learn the true scale of their family's fortune. One learns it gradually across a decade of increasing responsibility, absorbing the knowledge alongside the judgment needed to carry it. The other learns it all at once, at 22, in a single conversation that reframes his entire identity overnight. The first tends to treat the fortune as a responsibility. The second, far more often, treats it as a permission slip. Law number 11. A fortune can leave the family through a single bad contract. More generational wealth has been lost to poorly structured marriages and poorly structured partnerships than to any market crash in history. A single contract signed without proper protection can move a meaningful share of a family fortune permanently outside the family in a single legal proceeding. This is an uncomfortable subject for most families to address directly, which is exactly why so few of them address it before it becomes urgent. The families who protect their wealth treat prenuptial agreements, partnership structures, and buyout provisions as ordinary, unemotional legal hygiene, discussed calmly years in advance. The families who do not treat this as ordinary usually discover, far too late, that love and loyalty are not legal protections. Handle the paperwork while everyone still likes each other. That is the only time it can actually be handled well. Every family that has actually lost wealth this way describes the same regret afterward, that the conversation felt unnecessary and even insulting at the time it should have happened. Not one of them describes the eventual legal proceeding as feeling unnecessary. The discomfort of the early conversation is always smaller than the cost of skipping it. Law number 12. The family that keeps its story keeps its wealth. Every family fortune began with a specific person making a specific set of difficult decisions under specific pressure. The families who tell that story deliberately, repeatedly, across generations, keep a living memory of exactly what building the fortune actually required and exactly what losing it would actually cost. The families who let that story fade raise heirs who experience the fortune as simply a permanent feature of reality, the way a person might experience the ocean, always present, impossible to imagine ending. That is precisely the mindset that ends it. Tell the story. Not as a lecture, but as an inheritance every bit as real as the fortune itself. A family that remembers how it was built rarely forgets how easily it could be lost. The families who last generations almost always have a version of this ritual, a dinner, an annual meeting, a simple retelling that keeps the founder's original struggle alive in the minds of people who never lived through it themselves. It costs nothing, and it is skipped constantly because it feels sentimental rather than strategic. It is, in fact, one of the most strategic things a family can do. 12 laws. Most families will hear all 12 and change nothing, because the founder is usually still alive, still healthy, and the collapse always feels like a distant hypothetical right up until it is not. The families who actually beat the statistics start applying these laws decades before they seem urgent, not after. Go back through these 12 honestly. Not which ones sound wise in a video, but which ones your own family's actual habits are already violating, right now, while there is still time to change course. That honest audit, uncomfortable as it always is the actual beginning of a fortune built to last past you. If this shifted the way you see wealth, then don't stop here, because what you've heard in this video is only the surface. There are deeper layers to psychology, influence, and wealth that simply can't be explored fully in one video. Not because they don't exist, but because most people aren't ready to hear them. That's why most stay average. If you're not one of them, then subscribe, because every video here is designed to sharpen your mindset, increase your value, and separate you from the crowd. No fluff, no noise, just strategy. Most people will watch this and move on. A few will stay and change. Decide which one you are.